you for joining us. This is Paul.
And Chris.
And you're listening to Diesel Performance Podcast. Chris, we have a huge BOGO sale going on right now over at DuramaxTuner. You want to tell the listeners about it?
Yeah, buy a Stealth Turbo. You get a free boost test kit for free. A free boost test kit for free, right? You get a free boost test kit. I think one thing that diesel enthusiasts love just as much as diesel pickup parts is tools.
Yeah.
And there's no secret. I mean, the boost test kit is something that's a little unorthodox. It's not like your 1/4-inch ratchet set or your 1/2-inch ratchet set, but it's a specialty tool that I think goes really hand in hand with making sure that you're keeping up with the wellness of the truck. So I feel any turbo diesel owner or enthusiast should have a boost test kit, whether it's a stock truck or there's some upgraded modifications. And then we have free, real cool tuned it hats we're giving away with every tuning purchase as long as we are shipping any products out. So if it's an email tune file, not available for the hat unless we're shipping something to you, then we'll throw the hat into the mix.
Yeah. Yeah, the hats are cool. They're the new tuned it hats. So they look really awesome. Make sure you guys go ahead, give Chris a call or shoot him an email. Get a hold of him. I know you'd be happy to help out any of the listeners.
More than happy to. So see Emke at DuramaxTuner.com or you call me at the shop, 815-568-7920.
That's right. Today, Chris, we have some really cool show set up. So we have Nick Priegnitz coming on. Guys, I know we heard him last week for the drive to boost pressure ratio, Diesel Insights. Definitely go and check that video out on YouTube. But today, we have him on to actually talk about turbo R&D. So research and development in a very real way.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, for myself being an enthusiast and, before ever starting here, you would think like, oh, this turbo's on the market, that turbo's on the market, that product in general is on the market. But you don't really think about what efforts that company had to put in to get to that point that product was available and for sale. And Paul, I mean, I think I speak on behalf of both of us here. Being here as tenured employees as we are, we've learned what that blueprint looks like, right? Yeah. How long does an R&D process take? And as some of these vehicles get newer, that timeline becomes more aggressive.
Sure. And we've already talked to Nick, so we're recording this afterwards, and I think one of the things that I thought was really cool about the conversation is that we got a chance to ask some questions and poke into some things that even after all of our years here, I didn't know, things that I actually thought were really interesting. So guys, stick around. Right after a word from our sponsors, you're going to be hearing from Nick Priegnitz from DuramaxTuner talking about the Stealth Turbo R&D program. And then also at the end of the show, we're going to have our super tech and our remote support expert on the show together to talk about a really exciting topic as well.
Upgrade the factory transmission oil cooler in your truck with the XDP Extra Cool Direct Fit Transmission Oil Cooler. The XDP Extra Cool Direct Fit Transmission Oil Coolers provide you with an upgraded bolt-on design. Each transmission cooler is built with a high-efficiency core to maximize cooling. Designed as a direct fit replacement, this transmission cooler comes ready to install with all the brackets, hardware, and accessories needed for installation. To find out more about the XDP Extra Cool Direct Fit Transmission Oil Coolers, check out xdp.com or find a local dealer near you.
Worley Custom Fabrication is known for their world-class powder coating, S300, S400, traction bars, and all sorts of other just really, really cool parts for your Duramax, Cummins, and I think even a few Power Stroke parts here and there. Today, we're going to be talking about the 2020 GMC 2500 and 3500 Fender Flare Billet Marker Light Delete Kit. These brand new L5Ps have the marker lights, and a lot of guys don't like them. Just flat out, just a lot of guys are not into that look. What they would prefer to have is a color-matched billet piece right there to delete that light kit and have it just look a little bit cleaner on the truck, a little bit less flashy. So it's kind of a really cool understated exterior piece. And I think it's one of those that it's pretty easy to scan over, but once you see it, you're like, oh, I get it and I love it. So these will help you clean up the look of your 2020 GMC Sierra or Denali HD truck by replacing the amber fender flare marker lights with these CAD designed, CNC machined, billet aluminum marker light delete plates from WC Fab. Available with machined WC Fab logo or without, in raw aluminum, or of course what you're all going to choose, paint matching of fine texture or fine texture black powder coat to blend into the OEM black plastic fender flare trim. Installs very, very easily. It's a couple of simple hand tools. Comes with everything that you guys are going to need to install it. If you are thinking about it, or if you have one and you'd like to clean up the look a little bit, no problem at all. Jump over to wcfab.com and you'll be able to find that part right away. The other sponsor I wanted to talk about today is Exergy Performance. With their background in OE development and manufacturing, Exergy Performance brings a unique perspective to the high performance world. They know what features and specifications need to be to ensure proper function. They know how to produce them, and they know how to verify that they're correct. The verification process and the equipment that they use is very untypical of a standard diesel repair shop. It actually allows them to look at many more system performance characteristics beyond just the average fuel output, which is how most shops will just test it. What they test is actually from idle to full power using factory calibration points and a few points of their own that they've added for the high performance market. They can fully map a set of injectors and have done so for, I don't know, a countless number of people out there. The guys who are running at the very top of the industry are running Exergy. The guys who are running their normal street truck are running Exergy. Every one of our employees who has a modified set of injectors is running Exergy. There's a reason that we use them time and time again. If you guys are looking for more, you can check out Exergy's website, but you're probably best off giving a call over to DuramaxTuner.com, giving a call over to WC Fab, giving a call over to any of their distributors who are out there. Also, if you need technical assistance and you've bought from a distributor, I believe you could still reach out to Exergy if you need to. Nick Priegnitz, how the hell are you?
Great. Glad to be here. It's been a while.
Yeah, it has been a while. Now, listeners, you guys may have heard Nick on last week's show. We ran the audio clip from drive pressure to boost pressure ratios.
Okay.
That was a fun video. I know we took quite a bit of time to make sure that one got all the way through the finish line.
Yeah, I noticed you said video, not videos, when in reality we did shoot 2 full versions of that video, which is unusual for us.
It really is. But it's also one of those opportunities where I think we got to really nail it down and be really happy with that finished product. So listeners, if you guys haven't checked it out, go watch the video. There's some really cool visual cues that you may have not picked up in the podcast.
Yeah, been a lot of positive feedback on YouTube. I mean, absolutely, we got a lot more concise on the second shoot, and I was pretty happy with the end result.
Absolutely. Chris, we got Nick in the studio today to talk about turbos. So
Our favorite topic.
listeners, you guys just heard, like we said last week, a little bit about drive and boost pressure relationships, and I know we talk that largely revolves around a turbocharger discussion, of course. But one of the things that I think is kind of a mystery to most of the people out there is how the R&D process actually works. If you were to just scan the internet and read through some forums, I mean, pretty much pull a cover off, slap a wheel in it, call it a day. Turbo R&D done.
R&D done, right?
I just bought a brand new truck. Why is there nothing on the market, right?
I like that. I like that a lot. Now, Nick, you've been on the show many times. We've asked you before how you got your start in diesel performance. I thought maybe for our new listeners, you could kick us off today and tell us about just a little bit about your background in diesel.
My background in diesel. I started DuramaxTuner in 2007 in my house, garage. Moved to Illinois in 2009. Started putting the shop together in 10, 11, and really have just been growing the tuning shop. The business, of course, started as DuramaxTuner, primarily tuning Duramax trucks, and just continued adding tuning platforms. And then in around 13, 14, started adding turbochargers to the mix, basically just vertically integrating manufacturing stuff. And over the years, we've added more and more turbochargers and more platforms of tuning. And the business is 25 people now, and 40,000 square feet. Manufacturing is half the business, and tuning is the other half. And you guys are here to. Yes, you've been with me for the ride, Paul and Chris.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. So I started back in 13. Chris, you were
14.
in 14.
Yep.
Yeah, I was there when it was just I mentioned it to a customer yesterday who was here with his 2020 and talking about how large the building is, and I was like, man, when I started there was one rack.
Yeah. One rack, 5,000 square feet, and that was like, oh, look at all this space we got.
Yeah.
We should cut some holes in the walls. Yeah.
I went with buddies to Nick's house in Crystal Lake when he was working out of his garage, and then went with buddies to Union, and then started with, in Marengo when we first got into Marengo. So it's pretty crazy. We come to the shop, right? And I remember when we first looked at the shop we're in now, it's like, wow, there's so much space. And now a couple years later, it's like,
goldfish,
which is a good thing. It's a good thing.
Yeah.
That's it. And we've seen the turbocharger development over time. So Chris and I, obviously, we work here. We've seen it start where it was just like the Lb7 64, the Stealth, right? That
was the only
flagship
Charger.
Yeah.
I remember talking to Nick about getting into the VVT stuff. A 64. I mean, that was in 14.
Well, and that's what it comes down to, right? Because we've watched this brand of the Stealth turbos develop over time, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit from your side about what that started as and kind of where that's grown to.
Yeah, I mean, it started on the Lb7, right? I mean, Chris was just saying the Lb7 was the first one that we did, the first one that we had success with, and really it was buying from a third-party vendor a turbo that was basically built to spec, right? So an Lb7 Turbo Charger with a 64 millimeter compressor wheel, and oh my God, this thing really does drive nice. I mean, like we got a lot of extra performance out of it, and an extra 70 horsepower or so. So started stocking and inventorying those turbochargers, and as we started to realize, like, maybe the durability isn't as great as it should be on these turbochargers. Like when they work, but occasionally we have failures, and we really don't have a good way of fixing the failures or improving durability.
Our name's on it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is a turbo that's carrying the brand name now, and it's a flagship product, and we're selling a good amount of them. And it just became a very frustrating thing. So, the first turbo that really went through the R&D process was that Lb7 Stealth 64 turbocharger, and it as a matter of necessity.
Yeah.
we are not okay with the failure rate on this turbocharger. We have to do something about it and jump into it and find out what's going on, right? So it was a matter of necessity. The next one after that, the Stealth 64 for the VVT was big eyes, right? Like, okay, the product is very strong on the Lb7 side. We can grow this product. We can, of course, sell more turbochargers, and the 64 for the VVT would really represent the brand well. It'd be in that 600 rear wheel horsepower, great drivability, great windshield experience, towing performance, everything that we tout as a brand. Great drivability, great power, right? Smoke control, all that stuff. So, the Stealth 64 VVT was the next one that we jumped into, and, that...
It seems so long ago, doesn't it?
It was a long time ago.
Yeah.
Like, those first
really
turbos were puppy love, man.
Yeah.
Now I do remember watching also as the brand grew, we started to do the 64s, and really when I was there working with customers and helping them get into a new turbocharger, the 64 really was kind of revolutionary about being completely drop-in, completely stock appearing, upgraded replacement turbocharger that you didn't need a custom tune for, you didn't need any custom parts for. You literally pulled the old one out, put the new one in, and it drove great. You got everything you wanted. And then some people, Chris Emke, started talking about a larger turbo. And if I remember rightly, towards the Cummins, isn't that where the 67, where we first started talking about it, or was it the Lb7?
I don't know which 67 we did first. I think it was the VVT.
Really?
Yeah, I think the VVT 67 was the first foray into the 67. And, we're a performance culture.
Yeah.
Like, yes, we have a strong brand in the 600, low 600 horsepower market, but the guys who work here want 800 horsepower parts. And so, after months or years of being told that we need to build a 67, eventually a guy has to give in.
Yeah.
And go down the 67 path. And that, that turbocharger was more of like it fulfilled a different need from personally and a different need in the business.
Yeah.
But I thought it was interesting that you brought up the points of, you're flashing back to your salesman days where you're explaining all the key features and benefits of the turbo, right? And I don't think we knew that stuff when we made the turbochargers. Like, we didn't have a checklist when we built the Stealth 64. When we first specified the Stealth 64s that we stocked back in 12 or 13 or whenever it was. We didn't say we want a bolt-in, drop-in turbocharger that's going to reduce smoke and lower EGTs and do all these things. We just tried the turbo. It worked. We knew we liked it. We knew our customers liked it. So we started stocking it.
Do you remember we had some larger turbos from other manufacturers that we had tested several times? And when I started in 13, I was pretty much told, like, single turbos are just going to drive like shit. Like, listen, I'm sorry.
Well,
it just
is
what it is.
Wasn't there,
Yeah, and the platforms weren't there. I mean, we weren't tuning LMLs then, right? So it was like, it's just, yeah, they're going to make power, but they're going to be real doggy. They're never going to take off. And we had tried some other stuff that was like a 72 drop-in or something like that. That was just
S300 center sections and stock housings,
all sorts of
S400s and different things. Like, there was a couple years where, like, and those turbos made power. Like, we had them. They worked great. And in the era of 2014, 2015, they were awesome.
Well, and I also remember the Cummins Turbo Shootout, where we took 6 of the most popular quote-unquote drop-in turbos, and I'm using air quotes on a podcast because many of them were not, in fact, what we would now consider drop-in. But yeah, we tested 6 of them, like, side by side. Really fun test to read through.
That was if you exist in this place as an enthusiast, you owe it to yourself to read that article, because that is the most time and energy and money I've put into anything that didn't make me a cent.
Well,
we didn't sell any turbos then. We sold twin turbo kits for Duramaxes only at the time.
I feel that's an incorrect statement, though, because even to this day, guys do still use that as a buyer's guide for turbos.
Yeah.
And it's leverage where, that was kind of like the introduction of, I mean, we didn't have a 5.9 turbo. That wasn't even a thought process back then.
No, we didn't have anything to sell.
And then when we started getting into the R&D, with the 5.9, like, we worked and used that data collected, so, it has benefited. It has benefited.
I shouldn't say it didn't make me a cent. It was a lot of learning came out of that article, a lot of learning for everybody on staff, really. I mean, we spent weeks on the dyno and tanks of fuel on the dyno, testing spool up and standardizing parts. And I mean, it was, we learned a lot.
We did. And I think that was also one of those that, as I look back into some of the other turbos that we started building and where that Stealth 64 came from, I kind of think back to that article and going through that and reading aftermarket turbochargers that cost more than stock, that make less than stock, that spool up slower than stock, and, like, a few of the guys who, like, made big power but had no other practical purpose of their turbo. Home run. There are people looking for that.
Right.
100%. There were people searching for that exactly there.
Yes.
But yeah, the Stealth has always had this idea that you could drop it in and drive it, and that's really what like the core feature was. As it's changed over time, we've started to get into newer and newer turbos. Can you talk a little bit about what the difference is of maybe working on, like, the 3rd gen Cummins or the Lb7 compared to getting into, like, the LMLs and the especially now with the L5P and the new 351 and 300 VGs?
Yeah, I would say early on in the game, we didn't have as much manufacturing experience. We didn't have as much supplier relations experience. We didn't maybe know all the key boxes that we wanted to check while building the turbocharger. And now as we go through, I shouldn't say go through, now as we go into an R&D project, I would say we have our map a lot clearer. So we know, if the turbo can't do these 5 things, it's not something we're going to sell to our customers. If we can't reliably get parts for this turbocharger quickly, we're not going to build it. If we can't test it on multiple different trucks locally, we're not going to build it, right? So there's a, the roadmap is set, and as we went into the 351 market, it's like, okay, we had the benefit of basically tuning and dynoing, 60% or 70% of the turbochargers on the market. I had that frustration in me from trying to tune those turbochargers, and I'm not going to throw stones on the podcast here. I'm just going to say, like, it the state of that market is it could.
There's give and take.
There was
a lot of give and take.
It could frustrate a tuner, right? So there was opportunity there. So I, as I went into it, I said, okay, we need to build a turbocharger that isn't going to frustrate tuners, because tuners are the ones who are basically coaching the customers. So that's it, right on the first one. It needs to be durable. It needs to make power, which most of the turbos that we tested on the dyno weren't making extra power. No matter how hard we pushed them, they weren't making extra power. I mean, maybe 10 or 15 horsepower, but who's going to buy a turbocharger that doesn't make more power regardless of what the specs say? It just doesn't make sense. So, I saw a lot of opportunity in that market, and I just that was part of the motivation going into it.
Well, that's an interesting point, because I guess for all the years I've been here to watch the Stealth Turbo program, I've never been on the side of R&D where I actually get to hear how we pick what's the next turbo to work on. So I have heard some of the problems that have caused some of your roadmap. So like, can we get parts for it? Like that is something we learned over time. That was not like, oh no, I have foresight. Don't go down this trap. It's like, well, this is a great idea and a great project. Let's go for it.
Absolutely, Paul. I mean, the size of our business. We're a bigger fish in this pond, but in the pond of OEMs, we're nobody.
Right.
So if we can't get parts for it, there's only so much we can machine in house. There's only so much we can develop in house and engineer. We need some outside help. So if that outside help, if those outside channels don't exist, it makes our job that much harder.
What about projects that you've gotten into that you've scrapped? Like, is there a point in R&D where you're just buried and it's not worth it?
I'll tell you about a project that I this is an example of like enthusiast projects gone wrong, right? When an enthusiast owns a business. So the HE351 VE, the first round was probably 3 or 4 years ago, and it involved looking through a core pile and seeing that, okay, the 7.8 liter Duramax uses a turbocharger that's remarkably similar to the HE351 VE in orientation, meaning it's a T3 or T4 flange. I don't remember now.
T4i.
T4, whatever. And so the 7.8 liter wasn't the T4i.
No, the Cummins was.
Cummins is, yes. But it wasn't. It was basically a VVT Garrett that would work in a T3 or T4 orientation. And I remember thinking, oh man, all the frustration these guys are having with the HE351 VE, we can just apply what we know in the VVT space and build a Garrett VVT that'll bolt in place of this whole set. And so I pushed my team to develop parts to do that. And, 30% of the way into the project, realized, okay, I have a pallet of turbochargers, I have a bunch of drawings, I have all this stock in, and we're starting to cut parts. And my God, how am I ever going to make money on this thing that we have to make 4 custom pieces for and source these weird cores and build a translation controller that changes the signal from the whole set to the VVT? And it's like, yes, this is an amazing idea, but it's not practical to manufacture and make this turbocharger.
There's just,
So I had to walk away. I walked away from it.
That's a tough one too, because there is that problem of like, this is a great idea compared to this is worth pursuing.
Well, I think also, like, as these vehicles are becoming newer, and I think this piggybacks on what you said about your idea with the Cummins charger, the turbos are becoming more complex. There's more moving components.
Yeah.
So you have to consider, okay, on July 1st, I'm going to start investing time in the R&D on developing this turbo. What's that timeline? Like, what does that look like when you have all these moving parts? You got to have some type of end goal here where, okay, if I start on June 1st, it's ready to go to market end of that year, the beginning of that following year. Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, I would say I'm pretty proud of our R&D process right now. I'm not going to say it's a benchmark for any large OEM out there, but for the size business we are, I think we're able to turn projects around pretty quickly.
Leaps and bounds from where it was a few years ago, right?
Especially in the turbocharger program. So and I would say if we start a project and we're selling turbos 18 months from the start, we're probably doing pretty good.
Yeah.
And that's just by the time you do durability testing and you uninstall and reinstall 5 or 6 different versions of the turbo on a truck and dyno oil versions and tune oil versions, and it just takes time.
You don't realize that, like, oh, there's a turbo, we're going to pull it off, put another one on, and then we're going to set a day for the dyno. That's a week process,
right?
Like from start to finish, data collection, revisiting, stopping what you're doing that day, revisiting it the next day with a clear mind. Like there's a lot of things, like, you know, kind of going to like the 6.7 Cummins Charger, the 351 VE 300 VG. That was a turbo that, I mean, how many revisions were on the test truck?
I know we've had at least 4 or 5 turbos on your truck. You know, you got to put miles on it. We got to dyno each one. We got to see, you know, what the throttle response is, what the tuning's like, how do the bearings hold up. That means putting miles on the turbocharger, right? I mean, that's all that stuff takes much more time than you think it should, especially when you're parallel developing multiple turbochargers and everybody's, you know, pulling for your time.
Well, I love too that that's on like the testing end, but like what on the development side? Because you sit down. So you sit down and you say, okay, here's our checklist. We have an idea of a bunch of different trucks we could try to build turbos for. Yeah. Went through our checklist. We picked one. This is what we're working on now. Do you start to go through like customer feedback? Do you get the truck out on the road and start to collect data to figure out like where the problems are? Do you just immediately come in and tear it down and start to inspect it and be like, oh, well, this sucks, or, you know, I could do that better?
I think we had our checklist, which was make more power, maintain factory spool up, tune easily, be durable, and I don't have the checklist in front of me, right? But basically that stuff. So as we're putting our first test unit together, it's okay. What parts do we have from our suppliers? What's our best guess? Put the best guess on the truck. Does it spool like stock? Does it make more power? Is it durable? Does it install like a factory turbocharger?
Right.
And basically, the first turbocharger made exactly the same fucking power that the stock turbocharger made. Was a pain in the ass to tune. Had upside down boost, drive to boost ratios. And it's just a flop. And that is when you're in my position, you're just like, oh my God, what am I doing? Like, what made me think that I could do this, right? And then you go back and you look through and you cut away and you talk to, and that's the benefit of having a great team. And really, you know, the guys in the turbo department are awesome at listening. We have a really good ability to dialogue and brainstorm and talk, and it's not you watch my videos and you think, okay, yeah, Nick knows all this stuff and he just tells everybody what to do. And it's not like that. It's, okay, guys, we have this problem. This turbocharger does not make power. What are we missing here? What is the closest thing that we know that makes power? And what is different? What can we try? Like, let's systematically isolate what variables that are on this turbo that are either costing us power or going to make power next. So there we go. Let's test out a different turbine. Let's test out a different cut. Let's test out a different nozzle ring and shroud plate. Let's test all these things, right? And all these things take time and money to test and energy. And I think that's where a lot of my competitors in this space got hung up or frustrated or figured nobody's going to care if I don't do this.
Yeah.
And, that's life.
That's it too, right?
A lot of this space, right? You know, a lot of competitors, a lot of manufacturers, they'll sell or advertise, 64, right? So as a general consumer, well, this place has a 64, that place has a 64, these 3 other guys have 64s. It's all the same thing, right? But that's not, in no way, shape, or form is that the case.
In no way, shape, or form.
And what I like to tell guys all the time is you can compare all the different 64s. The way that turbocharger's drivability is managed is generally based on the hot side of the charger, the exhaust side. And when we're talking about research and development and R&D and all that whole process, it wasn't the compressor side that we were having the problem with. It was all exhaust side. Exactly. And that's where the 67s come in, even the 64, like any of the chargers that we've done, that's what separates the turbos that are on the market, I feel.
Yeah. I mean, you can get the job 50% done by picking a compressor wheel.
Yeah,
I mean, everybody
100%.
knows that, right?
Yeah.
And that's, unfortunately, that's still the way this market is presented to the customer, is on the inducer of the compressor wheel, which is basically the most simplistic way of describing anything.
Yep.
It's the piece I can see if I take off my intake. I don't know what else you
I'm
would
gonna
want
put
me
my
to
finger
measure.
on it and spin it.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, exactly.
We've talked about this in sled pulling for years, that some of the things that people attribute to be the most important turn out to be maybe the least important.
Yeah.
But that R&D process is what digs that out, right? It's taking those swings and seeing it not work. It's building a turbo and watching it fail, or seeing it not make the power and being frustrated, and having your shop guys super excited when you tell them, like, hey, you're going to need to swap that again.
Yeah, if you guys were in video, I'd have you cut to a picture of the mechanic, just frowny face, right? I mean, good news, bad news.
Right.
Good news is you still have a job. Bad news is it's swapping this turbocharger on this truck.
There's a
for
couple.
The 6th time.
There is a couple of trucks, mine included, where the shop guys just don't even want to look at it. There's a couple of the L5Ps that have been floating around, my truck included, where they're just like, don't fucking put that in front of me.
Over it.
Yes,
Over
yes.
it. I love that because, well, and that is the struggle of R&D, right? Because it's not like you said, walk in and know everything. It's you don't walk up to the plate and go, oh, well, I've made Cummins turbos and I've made VVT turbos. So what could be so complicated about making a Cummins VVT turbo?
Right.
Yeah,
Turns out everything.
Turns out everything.
And I feel like that's every turbo project we get into, that no matter how much I hear in the beginning when like you and the other R&D and turbo guys are all like super excited about how easy this is going to be, and then I get to hear the updates about 6 months through about like, well, blah blah blah, grumble grumble grumble. we just learned this.
Yeah. It's it's good around here and it's bad. It's good because there's enthusiasm and there's excitement and everybody wants to be a part of it, and when it's great, it's like it's really great, right? But halfway through the project, when you've literally made 10 horsepower over the stock turbocharger, and you just like, why?
You get gut checked.
It's a major gut check, and that's a challenge, and that's part of what keeps this business interesting for me. Is like every new platform, the turbos get more complicated, they get more well balanced to the trucks. It gets more difficult to improve on them compared to what the factory does. And the OEMs they're really stepping up their game, and just like they are in the engine output, right? So, the OEMs, they continue to encroach into our space.
But that's it, because we're also watching that customer demand continue to rise, and it's wondering you always assume that enthusiast demand for power will always outpace OEM's output, right?
Yeah.
Like there's always somebody who, no matter what they got off the showroom floor, I want more. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
more is better. When you get the guys that come from a 280 rear wheel horsepower Lb7 to a 400 rear wheel horsepower L5P, and it's not good enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it is that first week, right? Everybody that first week, it's got plenty of power.
Yeah.
It's got plenty of power. And then the first time somebody blows past them on the highway, they're like, all right.
That's that ego check. Yes.
I'm going to need to talk about that tune now.
Yeah.
Well, and I also think back to how much this sounds like when we've talked about tuning R&D and what is bad tuning and things like that, about getting a little bit more power, getting something that you could kind of just slap on a sticker and send out. Like, a lot of people could do that. I don't want to say it's easy, because I'm not downplaying that, but a lot of people could do that. But to like really dig through it and deal with those problems and deal with having to grumble and bitch about it and have your head up against a wall, to come in a few days later and be like, oh, figured it out.
Yeah, it's checking all the boxes. It really is. That's where drivability. I would say the drivability comes in on the tuning, right? So you have to drive the truck for a long period of time. It has to check all those boxes: torque converter, clutch lock up, and shift well, and defuel well, and have good throttle response, and all those things, right? Be able to back down EGTs when it's supposed to. The nice thing about the tuning R&D is that you can flash another tune on tomorrow and try it. Turbo R&D, we got to order tooling, we got to order metal, we got to draw the parts, we got to install it on the truck. It just the life cycle of R&D is so much longer in the turbo side, and I would just say the stakes are higher. Yeah, that's an interesting way to look at it, because I guess on the tuning side, usually what the holdup is for us is waiting for hardware support
to be able to communicate with the ECM. And then once you're communicating with the ECM, it's like, well,
now it's on us. You know, it's on him.
We got it from there.
Yeah.
Like we got it from there. Like you're still going to run into like I know now too with the addition of like Tim Mahoney who works on a lot of that like kind of scrubbing it out and things like that. It's usually fun to hear him or poke at him about like, bro, what's up? Like,
Paul, don't get me fucking started.
Where are we at with that horsepower? You know, that's probably his favorite question from me. But yeah, it is fun to see that R&D and that excitement come through, and I love that. Like, obviously, guys, listeners, you know, we've been talking about the new products that just launched. We have Cummins VGT turbos, so we have the HE351VE and the HE300VG, both available on the website, along with the L5P Stealth 67 G2. Those products are up. The 2020 tuning is up. So you guys with the 2020 Power Strokes, we can tune those 6.7 liters now. But I also know from experience that means that we have a whole lot of free time from the R&D team. So can you give our listeners a little heads up? Like what's on the horizon? What are you guys working on right now?
Yeah, so other stuff we're working on right now on the turbo side, looking back at the previous generation Fords. So the twin scroll Ford is one of the...
So 11 to 14.
11 to 14 Ford turbo. So most commonly guys are updating them to 15 plus. We think there's opportunity in the twin scroll that just, you know, maybe this is the VVT HE351. Maybe it's not. So I mean, we're excited. We're doing a whole lot of turbine, just basically gutting the entire turbine side of that thing and starting from scratch. And then, of course, the compressors on those are fairly complex, and also looking to do a bearing upgrade on that turbocharger as well. So it's a pretty significant overhaul.
Coolest idea for a turbocharger from OEM that never fucking worked. Can I just say it screams?
I mean, you drive
468 Cadillac.
If you drive one of those, they're nasty.
I get it when they're working.
They
are so aggressive.
Responding. Yeah.
Do you think failures on those are an OEM design flaw or emissions equipment failure showing itself in turbo failure? Because they don't have a great reputation. Hence, people are upgrading them pretty commonly.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is overspeed. I think they're a very small turbocharger. The factory really kind of spec'd that thing to be responsive and to be able to make the power that it was designed for from the factory, and not to be run at 450 horsepower.
Plus the vulnerability, right, of where the wheels sit and where the bearings sit. It's very favorable. There's more real estate on the compressor side.
Yeah, I mean the wheel does hang out twice as far as a normal compressor wheel hangs out. You know, I think there's a number of factors that complicate things, and our hope here is to address all those and demonstrate that through some durability testing.
I love that. I'm super excited for that, because that is one that when that turbo came out, I was like, ooh, this is how turbos are going to be built now. Like this.
Yeah.
That
was like the new
changes
wave.
Everything.
Yeah.
And then I was surprised. I was relieved and surprised in 15 when they came out with just a total abandonment, like a completely Ford typical.
It's interesting.
We had a great idea, it didn't work, and now we're abandoning it.
It's interesting though, because when you think of like the 6.4s, you know, compound turbo from the factory,
love it.
Then they come with the the dual compressors design in the early 6.7s, and then now like we look at a newer L5P Duramax or even the LML, like those turbochargers are much smaller. As the Duramax line continues, the turbos get smaller, but they're more responsive and they're capable of making the same, if not more power, but in a broader RPM window, right? They're able to come in earlier. So it's unique to see, like, on an LOI, right? Big turbo, big exhaust housing, big compressor wheel. At the time, they were okay. And then as the RPOs come out and they are, newer to the market,
tighter and tighter.
Everything's getting smaller, and not just the wheel profile, but exhaust housing, that tightness, the vane cage and nozzle assembly, the way everything works. Everything is in unison with one another, right? It's sized appropriately.
Yeah.
And it performs the way it does. So,
yeah.
That is an interesting note on him. Well, Nick, I definitely appreciate you carving out so much time to talk with our listeners. Guys, we know you've been asking for it, so I know you guys are going to be excited for this one. Nick, if there's a piece of advice you could give out there to a new listener who's interested in upgrading their truck, what do you think that advice would be?
I would say if you can drive something with similar mods, do that. If you can boost test your truck and stay up to date on maintenance, moving baby steps. Those would be my all little nuggets of advice.
That's a good place to start for the new guys.
Yes.
Listeners, stick around. We got a really exciting segment coming up with our super tech and our customer service expert. Thank you so much. Jeremy Garnett, how the hell are you?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. Jeremy, of course, our super tech, here to talk a little bit more about a truck that you've worked on in the shop recently. So hit me with it, Jeremy. What's the truck we're talking about today?
2012 LML dually that we recently talked about, which had the secret emissions deleted, where they cut open the DPF and everything on it, and they welded it all back together, and we're going to dive back into that one a little bit.
Okay, so that one, we found out the truck was deleted, and you returned all of the emissions equipment on it.
Yes.
And now it's flawless and it drives, and there's absolutely never been an issue since.
No.
Okay. Well, hold on a second here, Jeremy, because I have somebody who actually has quite a bit of experience on this topic, and I want to bring them on the phone so that they can talk to us a little bit more about it.
Sounds great.
Remote support expert Sean Lynn, how the hell are you?
Good. How are you, Paul?
I'm doing good. Hey, I got Jeremy Garnett here with us, our super tech, and we're talking a little bit about a 2012 LML that was secretly deleted, a very, very hidden delete, but it came to the shop, found out it was deleted, returned all of the emissions equipment back on it, and I said, pump the brakes. I know somebody who knows something about this. Can you tell us about your experience with returning a deleted truck to emissions equipped?
Yeah. I actually ran into the same issue last year. Before I started here, my truck was deleted.
Listeners, thank you so much for joining us today. Chris Emke had to step out, so I'm going to wrap up the show myself. It was a pleasure having Nick Priegnitz on. And, of course, Jeremy Garnett. You guys can follow him on his Instagram, jgarnett00. Make sure you go check that out. He posts stuff about working in the shop all the time. He's got a really cool Hummer project right now. And so I've been seeing some pictures float through on that. Big shout out to all of our sponsors, Worley Custom Fab, Exergy Performance, XDP, and DuramaxTuner, or Calibrated Power. For today, this has been Paul Wilson, and thank you so much for listening.
Paul, don't get me fucking started.